So you have learned how to write to the console or the terminal window. In this lesson, I'm going to show you a few more techniques for writing to the console. So let's start by declaring a variable. Now let's say on the terminal, we want to print x equals 10. How do we do this? Well, first we go in the std namespace and pick up cout, which is an object that represents the standard output stream. I know it's a mouthful, but let me explain it for you. In programming, a stream represents a sequence of characters. The standard output is our console or terminal window. So using cout, we can write a sequence of characters on the standard output, which is our console window, right? Now, these double left angle brackets are called the stream insertion operator. It's an operator for inserting something to our output stream. In this case, we're going to write a sequence of characters which we specify using double quotes. Now in programming or C++ specifically, this is called a string. We'll talk about strings later in the course. So here we want to print x equals, and right after we want to print the actual value of x. So we terminate this statement and use cout one more time. But this time we print x, okay? Let's run our program and see what we get. So we see x is 10. Beautiful. Now, we can combine these statements into a single statement. So we get rid of the second cout and this semicolon, and then put everything on the same line. Now we are chaining multiple stream insertion operators. So if we run our program one more time, we get the exact same result. Beautiful. Now, what if we declare a second variable? So let's declare y and set it to 20, and then repeat. So one more time, cout, y equals, and then we add y. Take a look. All right, here's what we get. But wouldn't that be nicer if y equals 20 was on the second line? Well, to solve this problem, right here, we need to add a new line. So once again, we chain the stream insertion operator. And this time we go in the std namespace and pick up endl, which represents the end of the line. Okay? Now, let's run our program one more time. That is much better. Okay? Now, once again, we can simplify this code by combining these two statements. So again, we don't need the second cout. So let's remove that and this semicolon as well. Now, if we run our program, we get the exact same result. However, our code is not formatted properly. It's a little bit hard to read this code. So here I'm going to use tabs and spaces to align these operators. So what we have in our code looks exactly like what we expect in the output. Okay? This is better. Now, there is a tiny problem in this code. We have a bit of repetition of std double colons. So we have repeated this in two places. Let me show you how to simplify this code. So before our main function, we use the using directive to pick up the std namespace. So here we type namespace std. Now std is defined anywhere in this file, so we don't have to repeat it in multiple places. So we can simply access all objects in the std namespace. So let's remove that and this one as well. And finally, let's realign this bracket. Great. So now our code is cleaner, more concise, and easier to read. Great. Now here's your exercise. Imagine you have a store and you have made $95,000. Now as part of your tax return, you have to pay state and county tax at different rates. So state tax is 4%, whereas county tax is 2%. Now I want you to write code to show your total sales, as well as your state tax, your county tax, and the total tax you have to pay on this income. So pause the video and work on this exercise for 5 minutes, then come back see my solution. All right, here's my solution. First, we need a variable for storing the total sales. And for that, I'm going to use a double. So even though we don't have any cent values here, but for monetary values, we should always use a double. So double sales equals 95,000. Now, right after, let's print the total sales. Here we add a $sign. That's nicer. Then we chain the insertion operator to print sales, followed by the end of line. Now, before going any further, let's run our program and make sure everything works. So run. Total sales is $95,000. Great. Next, we need to calculate the state tax. So let's declare another variable called state tax. And here we get sales and multiply it by 0.04. And then once again, we print this on the terminal. So state tax is this value followed by the end of line. Now, once again, let's run our program and make sure everything works. So this is how I want you to write code. Write a bit of code, run it, make sure everything works before going further. Baby steps. So run. So our state tax is $3,800. Great. Now let's improve this code. The first thing I want to improve here is formatting. So the first two lines are about the total sales, whereas the second two lines are about the state tax. These are two different stories, right? So here I add a vertical line to separate these stories. Just like how we have multiple paragraphs in an article, we want to write our code so every story is separated from other stories, okay? So here's our state tax. Then I add another vertical line to separate it from the return statement. Great. Now, this line is totally fine, but generally speaking, it's best to avoid magic numbers like this here, because even though this is a very simple example, in more complex programs, these magic numbers might be confusing. Someone else reading your code may not know what that number represents. So here we can make our code more expressive by storing this value in a separate variable. So we declare a variable called state tax rate and set it to 0.04. And then we can reference that variable right here. Now it's completely clear what this value represents. It's our state tax rate. But this has another benefit. If we use this variable in multiple places in our code, and then tomorrow the state tax changes, we don't have to come back and modify multiple places. We have a single place where we have stored this value, okay? Now, there is a tiny problem in this code. The problem is that I can accidentally change the state tax rate. How can we solve this problem? Using a constant. So we qualify this with the const keyword. That's better. Now we have to repeat the same 3 lines for our county tax. So I'm going to copy this and paste it. And again, note the vertical line. This is to separate these stories. So over here, we're going to rename this to county tax rate, which is going to be 2%. And over here, we're going to calculate the county tax and print it accordingly. County tax. Good. Nothing new. Now we should also replace state tax rate with county tax rate. So let me show you a shortcut here. Look, I haven't typed county tax rate. I just typed kind of an abbreviation. So count TR. So we can use abbreviations to quickly type our code and press enter to complete it. Okay. Now let's run our program and make sure everything works. So our county tax is $1,900. Beautiful. Now the final part. We declare another variable called total tax, which equals state tax plus county tax. And finally, we print it on the terminal. Total tax. Okay. So once again, see how I have named my variables. All the variables are properly named. They're meaningful. There is no ambiguity in this code. We don't have T1, T2, TR, whatever. Don't write code like that. Next, we're going to talk about reading input from the user.